Okay, I gotta go come up in here one more time, because I'm seeing some stuff that's very interesting. And while I am in this, if you will, spirit, or while this is still in me to talk about it, for now, let me just cover one more thing. Let me make sure that you guys can hear me, and make sure that this is going. Refresh. Make sure this is okay. Okay, you can hear me. Let me cover one more thing, because there are people who are saying, well, the Somali people, the people of Somalia, saying that they believe that they are descendants of the ancient Egyptians, or how, yeah, that they are definitely related. And I can believe that as well. I've also spoken on that also. Yeah. But how can that be if they are, let's say, E1B1B, if they are the predominant Y DNA or paternal haplogroup is E1B1B, which I believe to be Shemitic, right? Especially if it is related, if it derives from, I do believe that the E haplogroup represent descendants of Shem, or one of the haplogroups to represent descendants of Shem. E perhaps also being linked with Hebrew. Okay, so how can that be if the ancient people of Kemet, if the ancient Kemetic people were Kemetic or Hamitic? Okay, that would make sense, right? But what I have been saying, and what I believe, and like what I just posted my community tab, that people need to understand, Edomite, who had already from the beginning mixed with the Canaanites and the Ishmaelites, being considering Canaan's wives, and where Canaan dwelled, and and then eventually, like we read about in Psalm 83, him making a confederate, um, with other, particularly Shemitic groups, mostly Shemitic groups, such as the Moabites, Ammonites, Ishmaelites, forming the Confederacy, right? And that's what became the initial quote unquote Arabs, as I explained, Arab in the Bible meaning a mixed group, mixed nations. And I'm saying nations, I'm not talking geography, and I'm not even talking race, but I am talking lineages. Okay. Yeah. So they kind of became like one people. But yeah, like I also explained to you that the Phoenicians were descendants of Edom. Okay. And yeah, let's please look at my live stream, even if you gotta come back to it because it's kind of lengthy. Please check out my last stream. Yeah. So what I'm saying is people need to understand the Edomites, like I had posted here, who had already mixed with the Canaanites and the Ishmaelites, consider Esau's wives even. They eventually fused in with the quote unquote Egyptians, even though we know Egyptian, that's a Grecian term. They had already fused in with the quote unquote Egyptians, or the indigenous Kemetic Hamitic rulers who were originally of Mitzrayim and Cush. Now, the initial rulers of Egypt were not just of Mitzrayim. We always think just Mitzrayim when we think Egypt, but they're also Cush. In fact, as some of you may know, the first ruler of Pharaoh over Egypt, Narmer, Means or Narmer, they may have been two, but Means and Narmer may have been two separate people. And some people believe, but we do know that this first ruler of Egypt was Cushitic. He was of Cush, right? Now, some people believe that Narmer means that some believe they may be two to have been two separate people. And then there are some who also believe that Narmer may have been Nimrod. And we know that Nimrod, when you think about it, Nimrod did establish the earlier worldly civilizations after the flood. Nimrod, became Baal, but Baal represented not just Nimrod, but the sons of Ham. There were two Baals, basically, two more than one Baal, representing Ham and Ham's son. Cush being grandson of Ham. Okay. Yeah. So, and of course, Nimrod representing the sun god and all of that. Yeah. So it's believed that Narma, or means, if you believe that two separate people were, well, either this person was a son of Nimrod, either this was Nimrod or a son of Nimrod. The Bible speaks of Nimrod. And yeah, who's later, deity Baal. And yeah, he represented the deity Baal represented Nimrod, as we know, and so on and so on. Yeah, and also, you know, when you consider the false trinity. But anyways, we do know that the descendants of Mitzrayim were initially influenced by the descendants of Cush. Okay, in fact, the initial pyramids were of the kingdom of Cush, right? The Nubians. These were the earlier Cushite Nubians. A lot of times people think it's just, you know, after the 20th dynasty or the 25th dynasty. No. What became Egypt was established not just by the descendants of Mitzrayim, but his brother, the descendants of his brother Cush as well. In fact, Nimrod, the Cushite, established the initial worldly civilizations post-deluge, after the flood, you know, Babylon, Akkad. Yeah. So it's not shocking that actually the descendants of Cush influenced their brother of Mitzrayim. Okay. Now this was, even though, yeah, we know thoughts, camera, action fell off. But this is what we typically think when we think Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay. Look at the Hamitic people over on the left. Okay. More so on the left. This is what we, you know, a lot of us may think. But yeah. But the thing is, so if we know that the Kemetic people, we're talking Mitzrayim and Cush, and the, you know, descendants of Ham, but that also includes Canaan and Put. We knew that they were Hamitic. Then how could there have been Egyptians under E1B1A, E1B1B, which is the predominant Y DNA haplogroup of the Somali people? Well, like I said, there was an, if you will, infiltration, just like we know later on with the Grecians. And I had talked about this before. Cleopatra was an Edomite. Okay. But that's later. That's later, the Ptolemaic period. I definitely believe that her father, you know, yeah, even if her mother was Hamitic, may have been Hamitic, but her father, and I know a lot of people don't, you know, they want to, I don't know why they want to claim Cleopatra so bad, but, and even when you look up that name, Cleopatra, yeah, because remember I did a live stream, I even kind of linking her with the Herodians, who we know were Edomites. But like listen to this here. Yeah, so like I said, you had Edomites who had already mixed in with the Canaanites, Ishmaelites. They fused in with the Egyptians, or the indigenous, or the Egyptians, or the indigenous Kemetic and Hamitic rulers, who were originally, the original people of Kemet were originally of Mitzrayim and Cush. Black, yes, I believe they all were black, including the Edomites. But however, the Horians or Horites, now that might be different. But like, check out, I shared this here. I got to sped up a little bit. Fair use. Fair use. I don't feel like reading all of that. Okay. So this person here, David USA, he's speaking on Adolf, you know who, you know, the leader of the Nazi regime during World War II, at his, yeah, supposedly Adolf Hitler's DNA, he was predominantly E1B1B. Now, how is that? Oh, yeah, and I also wanted to just show you there's some more famous people under E1B1B. You know, like Napoleon Bonaparte. But let me share what he's saying. Some of what he's saying.
I'm going to talk about
E1. I got it sped it up just a little bit. This is David USA, Adolf's E1B1B DNA.
B1B, subject about Adolf Hitler. Many of you heard about Adolf Hitler has the Jewish DNA. And
Now, why would he say, yeah, why have people been accusing Adolf? I'll just say Adolf. Why have they been accused saying that he has ish, ish, a little had DNA? Why would they be saying that? Why? Because they think they're looking at E1B1B.
this is what I found, what expert of DNA. And this is not my opinion, but what I read from this comment. E1B1B1 has many subgrades. The supposed test on Hitler's male.
Now, why is there so many subclades of E1B1B? Because Esau has mingled and mixed with different groups of people. There has also been a cause of mutations that led to mutation, like white skin, but that probably goes as far back as the Hivites or the Horites.
Relatives merely indicated M35 mutation, which is what E1B1B is equivalent to. But being German, Hitler's relative most likely belongs to E-V13 subgrade. E-V, V as a victory, 13 subgrade. The most common E3B, E3B as a boy, E3B sub variant in Europe. Okay, the Wright brothers belongs to it. That doesn't make them also Jewish.
Okay. So now he's saying here, and also you see in his description, he said E1B1B is Egyptian and Canaanites. See, they're thinking Egyptian, but nobody is mentioning the Edomites, right? He's saying, now we know that Canaanite is Hamitic, but remember, Esau did marry Canaanite women and fused them with, right? He's saying E1B1B is Egyptian and Canaanites, and E1B1A is Bantu West African, or, as we know, Negroes. Absolutely not Hamitic haplotype. Now, why is he saying absolutely not Semitic? That's because he knows that E1B1B must be related to E1B1A. And he still believes, this person obviously, he believes that we are descendants of Ham, or that black men are descendants, or Negro men are descendants of Ham. But being that he knows that E1B1B must be connected with E1B1A, he's convinced that, he's convinced that this is Hamitic, because they are convinced that all black, especially those who they would consider as quote unquote Bantu, they are convinced that they're Hamitic. But we know that we are actually descendants of Shem. Haplogroup E is Shemitic. But the thing is that the ancient Egyptians, we assume that they were Hamitic, right? Or Kemetic. Kemetic, same thing. We assume that they're descendants of Mitzrayim and Cush, right? Okay, like this brother here. Okay, this is Hebrew Israelite Online Learning Institute. He uploaded this like 3 years ago. He said, I have to finally address this directly and specifically. No more tidbits here and there. Now he's, you remember, and I even shared this information back when I did my video series over 10 years ago. They had found that Pharaoh Ramses the third. Okay, and let me just to back up. Ramses the third. Yeah, he was now he was of the dynasty. I believe was that the 20th let me see. What dynasty was he part of? Well, I'll look into it in a minute. Was it hold on. Ramses the third, was it the 20th or Ramses the third? He was, I was right. Okay, he was the second pharaoh of the 20th dynasty in ancient Egypt. And some scholars date his reign from March of 1186 BC to April 1155 BC. Okay. So yeah, he was the second pharaoh of the 20th dynasty. Okay. Yeah, Ramses III. Okay, and here's a depiction of him. Ramses, let me see. I got it up here. Yeah. Depiction of Ramses III, right? Now, yeah, now as this man who may be of Asian descent, David USA, on his channel, like he said that E1B1B is Egyptian and Canaanite, and E1B1A is Bantu West Africans. Absolutely not Semitic haplotype. Now, the reason he's saying that is because when he hears the E haplogroup, he's thinking Hamitic because he's thinking Africa. And then we've been taught that all African people are Hamitic, which we now know is not true. Okay. Egyptian minor, E1B1B1 has many subclades. Okay. And he's going further into that. Okay. But again, he's convinced, so he's trying to point out that E1B1B, he's pointing out its North African origin. So he's trying to, he doesn't believe that it's an Ish or Jewish haplogroup because he believes E1B1B to be Hamitic. Okay, and it seems like this might be what the person, Hebrew Israelite Online Learning Institute, and check what he's saying. Okay.
And here, this is what you're looking at. I put this together. This is the Hamitic DNA data, right? Let me bring up my so I can. All right. As you can see, I don't know if you all can read this, but on the far left, it says that these are the Hamitic groups. All right. And I put it in red so it can kind of stand out to you. I got E1B1A, which is the Bantus and all the Negroes all across the world. And then right next to it is E1B1B. Now, again, all these Hamitic groups are on the left. And you have like the Algerians, the Ethiopians, and obviously there's couple different types of Ethiopians. They have Libyans, Datog, Bargor, Beja, Southern Egyptians, mixed Ethiopians, Maasai. All of these are Hamitic Africans, basically. So if you look where it says E1B1A red right there, you see basically the biggest percentage of E1B1A is some place called the Amhara, Ethiopian. This is about 5.8% of their people possess the E1B1A. Not significant at all. And we know we mixed in with every nation. So to see a small percentage of us mixed in with some, African race, that's not uncommon, right? So go down the list. Let's start to the very top. Algerian, 0% E1B1A. Ethiopian, Aromaho, 2.5%. Ethiopian Wolate or Waleta, 0%. Ethiopian Oromo, 0%. Ethiopian Amhara, 5.8%. And then this Iraq, Libyan, I don't know what NT means, but I guess, it probably meant not tested. But that's okay. We keep it moving. The Tunisian, 0% E1B1A. Southern Egyptians, not tested. Mixed Ethiopians, 0% E1B1A. And the Maasai, another Hamitic group, not tested. But I figured theirs out because Barack Obama is from the Maasai tribe, and he's E1B1B. So Maasai is E1B1B too. But for this,
wait, say what? Is that true? I didn't even pay attention to that.
The Maasai tribe, and he's E1B1B. So I figured theirs.
Wait, for real?
Because Barack Obama is from the Maasai tribe, and he's E1B1B. So Maasai is E1B1B too. But for this data right here, they're not listed or whatever. Now let's go over to E1B1A. Algerian, 65% E1B1B.
Okay, so he had pointed out that certain these like the Oromo, the Ethiopian, a lot of these Iraq, Libya, they have very little E1B1A that you usually commonly, that's the common or predominant haplotype of the Negro male, right? So he's showing that they have little E1B1A, but he will show that they have a lot of E1B1B in them.
Ethiopian, 60% E1B1B. Ethiopian Balata, 58% E1B1B.
No, he's talking about like the Oromo, specific Ethiopian, now he's not talking about the Mercy. He's not talking about the more indigenous. He's talking about like, let's say he'll find like the Oromo Ethiopian. They have a higher E1B1B percentage, just like the Somali people.
Ethiopian Oromo, 56% E1B1B. Ethiopian Amhara, 50% E1B1B. The Iraq, whatever, 55.5% E1B1B. Libyan, 55% E1B1B. Tog, whatever that is, 54.2% E1B1B. Tunisian, 51% E1B1B. Southern Egyptians, not tested. Mixed Ethiopians, 50% E1B1B. Maasai, 50% E1B1B. Now, what that means, my people, in comparison to the E1B1A, these groups are overwhelmingly 50% and above. And this is just based on, this particular data, the ones that they tested, right? This probably might have been a small sample size. We don't really know, but the logical conclusion could be made that because these races of people, and these are the people that Zondervan and Genesis 10 and 6 tells us are the sons of Ham. More than 50% of them possess the E1B1B. So what that logically.
No, the Zondervan Bible Dictionary, they are looking more at geography, not necessarily at genetics. See, Esau is being uncovered. See, he's still convinced that E1B1B is of Ham and E1B1A is of Shem. They're still convinced because he's just hearing, oh, they're the Egyptians or they're the Ethiopians. But
he tells us and what we can logically.
I don't know where that came from. I guess I got a tab open, but I don't understand why it just all of a sudden start playing now. Yeah, that was odd. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't even click on the tab and it just started playing. But yeah, see, he is convinced that E1B1B because he hears Egyptian or he hears Ethiopia, and he's instantly thinking Cush, and he's instantly thinking Mitzrayim. Thus, and logically, Ham, right? But see, we're just talking geography now. Now, when we talk about Egyptians, like today, that we're talking geography. Now, there has been intermingling. There has been fusion over the centuries. There has been a fusion. Okay, so why is it E1? Why is it though that they still would, even though they will call, like, let's say certain Ethiopians, they'll call them Cushitic, right? But then they'll also still say that they're Shemitic, which doesn't make sense. How can you be Cushitic? Well, you could be both, yeah, and maybe that's what it is. But I believe that they're actually, some of these groups are actually predominantly Shemitic. And when I say Shemitic, I'm talking Esau. E1B1B, it makes sense. Even when you look on the branches, the E branch. Hold on, the E haplogroup branch. Y DNA haplogroup we're talking now. Like if we were to, okay, let's say this is the E haplogroup branch. Let me see something that's put together, share that wiki. Like if we look at the E haplogroup branch, now let's say E more than likely probably represents Eber, which is where we get Hebrew from. Okay, and going down here, I would assume, okay, going down here, eventually E1B, let's say this is Abraham. Let's say if E1B is Abraham and E1B1, let's say that's his son Isaac, but we also know he had other sons. But I'm just saying, going by, let's say, this branch. Now, when I looked up E1B1C, there was nothing really showed up. It was like just an extension of E1B1A. But anyways, if you notice here, so E1B1A, E1B1B, that would tell you that they're related. They're obviously related. However, there are different, more subclades. For whatever reason, there are more subclades. Well, I know the reason why there are more subclades with E1B1B. Also, you see more diversity with E1B1B. Like when you compare someone like Napoleon and Adolf, who were E1B1B, and Albert Einstein, E1B1B, and the Wright brothers, and you compare them to like people of Somalia. Now, are they both of the Caucasian race? No, I don't think so. I don't think that the people of Somalia have anything necessarily to do necessarily with the Caucasus for the most part. However, I do believe that there is a shared ancestor. That they both a shared paternal ancestor. And that ancestor was a melanated person originally, okay? Yeah. So E1B1B, yeah, they had E1B1B had to be related to E1B1A. It's a distant relative, but both Shemitic. Now, because like I said, yes, and they're like, how could they be Shemitic when the Egyptians, if you believe that the Somali people are descendants of the ancient Egyptians, but the Egyptians were Kemetic, right? Right? But do y'all believe that there was a time when the Edomites had some dominance in what became in fact, Egypt is a Grecian word. I showed you in my last live stream, check it out. I know it's long, but if you got the time to break it up, I showed you that more than likely the Hyksos represented the Shasu, like the Shasu of Seir, the Shasu of Yahweh. The Shasu, I showed you, Edomites, I believe strongly, and I strongly believe that the Hyksos or the shepherd kings were Edomites. Okay? And I told you who the original Arabs were. And I talked about the countries around the Edom Sea or the Red Sea. Okay? Yeah, so he's come to the conclusion. The thing is, he believes that they must have been Hamitic. Look, they're Ethiopian. These Ethiopian, they must have been Hamitic because they're E1B1B predominantly. Let me continue what he's saying here.
To conclude is that those Hamitic races of people, their Y DNA is E1B1B. They're not the same as us. E1B.
Yeah, they're not the same as us, but I don't believe that E1B1B is Hamitic. I don't believe that at all. I don't believe that E1B1B represents the indigenous Kemetic people, but they later fused in and became the predominant haplogroup.
1A. See, you might think, people who don't know about DNA, you might think that A and B is not a big deal, but that last letter is a huge deal. The E1B1A and the E1B1B says we are from two totally separate genetic bloodlines, right? So that being said,
yeah, it's separate, but it's not all that separate.
On to the next slide. All right, this screenshot, as you all can see, it says this is from December of 2012. Okay, it says Ramses III's DNA is E1B1B, right? But then it goes on to say the test also revealed he was murdered. And it's a genetic kinship, because they basically found two mummies they assumed was another smaller mummy was Ramses' son. All right, they said genetic kinship analysis revealed identical haplotypes in both mummies. Using the Witt-Ethes haplogroup predictor, we determined the Y chromosomal haplogroup is E1B1A. The testing of polymorphic autosomal microsatellite loci.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And remember, I also shared in my Ancient Egypt series from over 20 years ago, over 10 years ago on YouTube, I also shared these results. Initially, Ramses III, and that did have me boggled, but I shared, and proving that they were quote unquote Black, but it showed that he was of E1B1A, which is the haplogroup of a lot of Negro men who would be categorized as Negro, whether in the African continent or in the United States, E1B1A. But that did boggle me. Now, I know that Joseph may have rose to a position of power, but that did boggle me. But I was so busy just trying to prove that they were Negro. But that did boggle me. Like, how could that be? Yeah. So I figured like maybe it was actually E1B1B. I know that E1B1B was Black originally, but I'm just saying, but I just shared the information that was given that was said to be quote unquote factual at that time. But I wondered, was it actually E1B1B? And to be honest, that's what I want to think. I mean, that's what, not just what I want to think, that's what seems logical. E1B1B. And I know a lot of y'all don't want to believe that, because you want to believe, you know, I don't want to be sounding like these white races. We was kings, we was Egyptians. Yes, were the Egyptians quote unquote black? Absolutely. And even anthropologically speaking, I've proven, even with skull shaping, that they could have been put in the anthropological category of Negro, if we're just going by phenotype, skull shapes, and all that. However, by genealogy, they were not the same as us. They're black people, but not the same. And what were yeah. So I definitely believe he was more than likely E1B1B. And this is by the time of the 20th dynasty now.
Closely provided similar results of autosomal microcycle.
So just what he's about to also read is, because I can show you here. Okay. The query, AI overview, Ramses III E1B1B. The query Ramses III E1B1B refers to a wide DNA haplogroup associated with the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses III. Those studies have yielded different specific haplogroup predictions, with some pointing to E1B1A. Yeah, that's what they initially told us. Now, of course, they're going to do some searching and finding, because they don't want to believe that the ancient Egyptians were Negro. So, some of this newfound information could have been spawned from their own racist pride. But I'm going to still consider this information. Okay, and others to E1B1B or its branches like V22, Northeast Africa, indicating diverse African roots, highlighting Egypt's position as a crossroads of African genetics, not exclusively sub-Saharan or North African, but a blend. Interesting. Okay. So the initial findings, this is what they initially, the information they initially gave, which I put in my Ancient Egypt series. Early analysis suggested Ramses III and his son belonged to Y-DNA haplogroup E1B1A, frequent in modern West and Central African populations. E1B1A, think Negro male. Later evaluations, more recent work and reanalysis pointed towards E1B1B or V22, a lineage common in North and East Africa, like with the Saho people of Eritrea, suggesting links to regions like the Horn of Africa or Punt. Also you have the descendant. Punt is a descendant of Ham, however. Now, debate on accuracy. This discrepancy highlights challenges in ancient DNA analysis and prediction tools, with some experts emphasizing E1B1B for its strong sub-Saharan links and others E1B1B for Northeast African ties. Okay. So they just know, obviously, he had deep African roots, nothing to do with the Caucasus. You see people talking about it here. Now, this is a site where Upedia.com, site for white folks. 2012, we got the Y-DNA results of Ramses III, and they're talking about he was tested. They're saying E1B1B, although there's a faint possibility as E1B1B and going through the STR markers. And they're talking about, he looked Caucasian. Some of the comments here are interesting. Judging from pictures of the mummy, Ramses III was sort of Caucasoid. This might mean that even the Black African branch E1B1A was originally Caucasoid. Oh, they tripping. But anyway, they're tripping. See, what is this? Look, Caucasoid. Anyways, and then also here, this is from Ahmed El Sayed blog. Ramses III is not E1B1A. The study states it ran the mummy's haplotype through Athy's haplogroup predictor, and the result was 93% E1B1A initially. The problem is that the haplotype unquestionably has erroneous STR values, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So, but anyway, let me go back to the brothers, what he was saying.
Satellite loci, or the haplogroup predictor, goes on to say the test also revealed he was murdered. And it's a genetic kinship, because they basically found two mummies they assumed was another smaller mummy was Ramses' son. All right, it's a genetic kinship analysis revealed identical haplotypes in both mummies. Using the Witt-Ethy's haplogroup predictor, We determined the Y chromosomal haplogroup is E1B1A. The testing of polymorphic autosomal microsatellite loci provided similar results in at least one allele of each marker. They said although the mummy of Ramses III's wife Tai was not available for testing, the identical Y chromosomal DNA and autosomal half allele sharing of the two male mummies strongly suggests a father-son relationship. Now, so what I do see is that they were saying back then, erroneously that Ramses III was E1B1A. So I kind of stand corrected. I thought they kind of just started saying that after the whole E1B1A children of Israel thing and all that. But apparently they were saying it back then. But it's still incorrect, because in the next segment I'm going to show you where I don't know if this guy's a geneticist who put this together, but he put together a little deal to show them that they were wrong and their predictor was wrong, that Ramses is E1B1B, just like it says here. So let me go ahead and bring it up real quick, and I'm trying to give a little we call it narrate the little piece. Give me a second. All right, here we go. It says, why does Ramses III and son really belong to haplogroup E1B1B and not E1B1A, even though Whit-Apthey's haplogroup predictor tool says that they belong to E1B1A? All right. And then he goes on to say here, he's bringing up the little, I guess I don't know what he's doing here, but this person is kind of narrating it, but I'm doing my little thing for y'all. There goes, this is like the little autosomal chart. It says, revisiting the harem conspiracy and the death of Ramses III in anthropological, forensic, radiological, and genetic study. It says, using the Whit-Apthey's haplogroup predictor, we determined the Y chromosomal haplogroup E1B1A using Whit-Apthey's predictor. All right, the Whit-Apthey's predictor resulting in Ramses III and son belong to haplogroup E1B1A, but this is why he got it wrong. He's going to show us here coming up real quick. Whit-Apthey. And it goes, this place here called NevGen predictor, resulting in Ramses III and his son being haplogroup belonging to E1B1B. And he's going to tell us why. Because NevGen predictor resulting in Ramses III and his son belonging to haplogroup E1B1B, he used something he should have used that Whit-Apthey did not use. And that something is called, well, he goes in this to explain it. He says the reason for the discrepancy between Whit-Apthey's and NevGen's is that Whit-Apthey does not include the option for GATA4. NevGen places Ramses III and his son in their proper genetic context of E1B1B. There we go. So whatever that GATA H4 is, Whit-Apthey didn't use it, and so that's why he came out with the wrong haplotype for Rams.
Now, it's obvious it's Upedia.com. They're going to try to take this image of Ramses III and then comparing it to a Nilotic person or like a Cushitic person. Yeah. And, they're trying to see, this is a dark Caucasian on the left. And understand, they know what they're doing and making the skin look more even ruddier or light or browner, redder, browner, like to make this distinction. So, of course, obviously, with these findings, there is a European bias. But the bottom line is E1B1B, that's still, quote unquote, Africoid, if you will. Okay. It is still related to E1B1A, although not the same. Okay. So, yeah. So I know their agenda behind, but the point that I'm making is that I believe that Ramses III, although quote unquote black, okay, this is also Ramses III, okay, although quote unquote black, not us, if you understand what I'm saying, not E1B1A. I definitely would conclude, I would definitely believe that it was E1B1B before I would believe that that he was of E1B1A haplogroup. And I just want to share also that, yeah, and I'm gonna make sure, yeah, I'm just kind of caught up in this now. Yeah, like this is a little genetic lessons. Understand, this is not so before you think this is all Afrocentric or what you want to call Hebrew Israelite, look, these are now I have shown you that I believe the Hyksos were Edomites. Okay. And Esau, Edom's descendants, they were from the beginning. They first mixed with the Canaanites and the Ishmaelites, and they made a confederacy blending in with other Shemitic groups, even like the Ammonites, the Moabites, forming what we would call the Arab nations. But hold on. And the Ishmaelites, yeah. But check this out. This is a little short by Genetic Lessons. It's quiz time. Wait, let me. Okay, so give me a little quiz here. And it says haplogroups E1B1B is primarily as E1B1B. Oops. Remove this. Haplogroup E1B1B, this is a little short, giving you a quiz, is primarily associated with the influence of which historical migrations into Europe? Can you guys guess? A, the Germanic tribe. B, the Phoenician traders, considering what I talked about in my last stream. C, the Viking explorers. Or D, Neolithic farmers. Now, if you watched the last live stream, you would know.
Haplogroup E1B1B is primarily associated with the influence of which historical migrations into Europe, and here's the variants to choose from. I only can give you a couple more seconds to think before I will show you correct answer. Haplogroup E1B1B is primarily associated with the influence of historical migrations by Phoenician traders into Europe. This haplogroup is believed to have originated in East Africa or the Near East and spread to the Mediterranean and parts of Europe through the maritime trading activities of the Phoenicians and ancient Semitic-speaking people who originated from the region of modern Lebanon. This spread facilitated the genetic imprint of haplogroup E1B1B in these regions, marking a significant impact on the genetic landscape of the Mediterranean and parts of Southern Europe.
So you see, the answer is B, the Phoenician traders. And you see, you heard where he said what he spread. Now he believed that they originated out of East Africa. Like, that's what he believes. Out of East Africa, like the Horn of, that's what he believes. And you notice where he said where they spread. The Mediterranean, like think Greece, Rome, Spain, Portugal. Okay. North Africa, like the so-called Berbers of today. Okay. The Phoenician E1B1B is primarily associated with the Phoenician traders. E1B1B. And remember, I showed you in the last live stream, Phoenicians, it come from word meaning red. They were descendants of Edom. The Phoenicians were Edomites mixed with the Canaanites. That's the point that I'm making. And he has another one here. Haplo E1B1B is another quiz, is associated with ancient populations from rich region.
Particularly during the Neolithic period and subsequent migration.
Really?
It's a quiz time. Haplogroup E1B1B is associated with ancient population from which regions? And here's the options to choose.
So the options is North African. Now it says haplogroup E1B1B is associated with ancient populations from which region? Northern Europe, North Africa, East Asia, or the Americas?
Choose from. I can give you a couple more seconds to think, and then I'm going to give you an answer. This Y chromosome haplogroup is thought to have originated in the North Africa around 20-30,000 years ago and spread across the Mediterranean and into Europe, particularly during the Neolithic period and subsequent migrations.
Now, I don't believe 20-30,000 years ago. But anyways, yeah, North Africa. They believe coming out from North Africa. And listen to where he said he believed it spreads into.
E1B1B is common in North African populations and is found in parts of the Middle East, Southern Europe, and Balkans due to historical migrations, trade, and conquests. Its presence in Europe reflects the significant gene flow between North Africa and Southern Europe throughout ancient history. It's a quiz.
So I definitely believe Ramses III was E1B1B. And I just want to share something with you. Yeah, and there's more information on Ramses III, not E1B1B, but perhaps E1B1A here at this site here. There's another, well, well, let me just another anthropological site. But what is Hadad, or who is Hadad? One more thing I want to share with you guys. Okay, now in Wikipedia, Hadad. Okay, they're saying Hadad, Hadad is Sumerian, like Mesopotamian, was a storm and rain god in the Canaanite and ancient Mesopotamian religions. He was attested in Ebla as Hadad from the Levant. Hadad was introduced to Mesopotamia by the Amorites, a Canaanite group, where he became. Now, some people think that Moor might have came from Amorites. I don't know about that. Canaanite Moors, Amorites. I'm not sure, but introduced to Mesopotamia by the Amorites, where he became known as the Akkadian, Assyrian, Babylonian god Adad. Adad and Iskur are usually written with the iogogram. Okay. The same symbol used for the Horion. Remember the Horion, synonymous with Horites, God Tesh book. Okay. Yeah. And reading on, okay, Hadad was also called Rimon, Pidar, Repu, Baal, Zephon, and often simply Baal, like that's Lord. However, the latter title was also used for other gods. The bull, remember the bull, was a symbolic animal of Hadad. The bull, okay? He appeared bearded, often holding a club and thunderbolt and wearing bullhorn headdress. Hadad was equated to the Greek god Zeus, so it seemed like, it's like made him some kind of synonymous with Nimrod, but we know that Nimrod was a Cushite. Now, if you believe what was written, what we now can find in the book of Jasher, it was said that the book of Jasher claims that Esau killed Nimrod and took the garment that Nimrod had possessed, that was passed to him or was taken from his father or grandfather Ham, and passed down to his grandfather Ham, passed his father Cush down to him, the garment of animal skin that was given to like Adam and Eve, as clothing once they were put out of the garden. And some believe may have like superpowers. Some people believe that might be the origin of the superhero's cape, right? But the book of Jasher puts that Esau was killed. Nimrod, the Cushite, Hamitic, was killed by Esau. And took that. Yeah. So perhaps he also took on, I guess in a sense, like he took the place of Nimrod, who became the deity. He took the power in a sense, like that the Hamitic or the original Hamitic or Kemetic people had, in a sense, when you think about it. Okay, so Hadad was equated with the Greek god Zeus, the Roman god Jupiter, the Babylonian Baal. Well, yeah. But usually we think Baal, we think Hamitic, right? Now, were there any Edomite pharaohs? I just typed in Edomite pharaohs. Now, yeah, this was something I was also wanting to talk about. Hey, Instinctive. Yeah, now your haplogroup, being that we're women, more than likely, quote unquote, Negro woman would be under the haplogroups of L, whether it's L1, L2, and even actually a lot of Somali women, we may have the same mama. Even if not to say that, but yeah, most of the women are gonna, and it also proves, just like Benaiah Israel in their, they had in their one part of the Hidden Hebrew series, I think the Judah's DNA, it showed perfectly, it goes perfectly with genetic studies that shows that E1B1A originally had 4 wives, L1, L2, L3, and that's exactly what the Bible states, Jacob having 4 wives. So it says here, now there wasn't a single Edomite pharaoh, so they say, because remember now, Edom eventually learned, Esau eventually, it's like they taking on the identity of others. Now, of course, we know that there were those who were forced to convert during the time of John Hyrcanus in BC time to Jews. But then, you know, there are those, yeah, who they would intermarry into different kingdoms of people in power, whether they were Hamitic, Shemitic, Japhetic, or whatever, and then they take on their identity. Why is it that, like with the Ish people, they take on the mother? Think about that. But there wasn't a single Edomite pharaoh, but the Bible describes an Edomite prince. Now that's what they believe, that's what they claim. But the Bible describes an Edomite prince, Hadad, who gained favor with an unnamed Egyptian pharaoh after fleeing there as a boy, marrying the pharaoh's sister-in-law, and being raised in the Egyptian court. Yeah, this is who I just couldn't think of the name, who I was meaning to talk about in the last stream. Eventually returning to challenge Solomon and became an adversary to Israel, potentially ruling Edom. Ancient Egypt also had interactions with Edom, with Pharaoh Shoshank the first, you know, and these people did exist, and this is in the inscriptions. Yeah, so ancient Egypt also had interactions with Edom, with Pharaoh Shoshank the first, campaigning in the region, linking Egyptian power with Edomite territories, though he was an Egyptian pharaoh in Edom, not an Edomite pharaoh. No, I don't believe. Yeah, I believe that Shoshank, wasn't he? He was actually even Cushite, right? Because when we think Egypt, we automatically just think Mitzrayim, but it was Mitzrayim and Cush. Okay, yeah, we just think Nubians when we think Cush. Yeah, so, but let's see, what does the Bible say? In First Kings, this is around the time of Solomon, First Kings chapter 11. Let's go down to around, let me see. Okay, so as we know, Solomon had fell from grace at this time, and he had, you know, marrying all these foreign wives. Eventually, even though he was blessed with all of this wisdom and riches, but he married a lot of these foreign, tons of, like a whole bunch of foreign women, some of these wives being Edomite, Canaanite, you know, he just married all these different women that got him to worshiping, you know, he got into occultism and all of that, but, you know, him already having certain knowledge. And that's what that star is, that 6-point star, the seal, or the seal of Raphaim. Some call it seal of Solomon, but the seal of Raphaim, you know, with who the Raphaim are. But anyways, yeah, Solomon had fell from, so it says here, verse 14, and the Lord, Yahuwah stirred up an adversary unto Solomon, Hadad the Edomite. He was of the king's seed in Edom. For it came to pass when David was in Edom, and Joab, the captain of the host, was gone up to bury the slain after he had smitten every male in Edom. For 6 months did Joab remain there with all Israel until he had cut off every male in Edom, that Hadad fled, he and certain Edomites of his father's servants with him, to go into Egypt, Hadad being yet a little child. And they arose out of Midian and came to Paran, and they took men with them out of Paran, and they came to Egypt unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, which gave him an house. You hear me? They came to Egypt unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, which gave him an house, and appointing him victuals, and gave him land. And Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him to wife the sister of his own wife. So he became part, this Hadad, the Edomite, he became part of the royal Egyptian family. And Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him to wife the sister of his own wife, the sister of Taphanes the queen. Now I looked up, yeah, the sister, so he married, I looked up, now, I looked up who, yeah, I looked up, and looking up Taphanes, it says here at BibleGateway.com, Taphanes, she was the wife, an Egyptian queen. She was the wife of Pharaoh of the 21st dynasty, perhaps Siamon. The Pharaoh gave her sister in marriage to Hadad, the Edomite prince who fled from David to Egypt. Now, we have been taught that, oh, David, you know, his army pretty much destroyed the Edomites, and that was the end of the Edomites. No. That's how, you know, we may have been taught. Like, oh, that was pretty much the end of the Edomites. No. Just like I'm finding out with the descendants of the fallen angels, which I thought all died off with the flood. Let me see. Taphines cared for her sister's son Ganubath in Pharaoh's house. Among the various explanations of the name Taphines, the most likely following the LXX is Egyptian. Okay, the wife of a king. Okay, so Taphines. When I found out the Pharaoh, yeah, this is the Pharaoh Siamun. I can't say that I actually even really heard of him, but this was said to be the Pharaoh at the time. Siamun. Okay, this is Tafun. Yeah, this was the Pharaoh at the time. Netter Kirk Perea. Oh gosh, I can't pronounce it. Just Siamun. He was the 6th Pharaoh of Egypt during the 21st dynasty. Now remember, Ramses III though was of the 20th dynasty, right? Well, he's of the 21st dynasty. He built extensively in Lower Egypt for a king of the 3rd intermediate period. Yeah, so, okay. Okay, so she is so her sister, okay, this Pharaoh, okay, so this biblical account, it goes along with secular history. And the sister of Taphine, okay, so, and Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, so that he gave him to wife the sister of his own wife, the sister of Taphines, the queen. So this goes along, this biblical account, it goes along with secular history. And the sister of Taphines bare him Ganubath, his son, whom Taphines weaned in Pharaoh's house, kind of like someone similar to the story of Moses. And Ganubath was in Pharaoh's household among the sons of Pharaoh. And when Hadad heard in Egypt that David slept with his fathers, or that David was deceased, and that Joab, the captain of the host, was dead, Hadad said to Pharaoh, "Let me depart, that I might go to my own country." Then Pharaoh said unto him, "But what hast thou lacked with me, that behold, thou seekest to go into thine own country?" And he answered, "Nothing. Howbeit, let me go in anywise." And God stirred him up another adversary, Rezon, the son of Eliada, which fled from his lord Hadad Dezer, king of Zobah. Yeah, so talking about these are, and I'm only showing you this to show you you see here it says Hadad the Edomite in Wikipedia is a character mentioned in the first book of Kings who was an adversary of King Solomon. So I'm sure that there are other books that may, because we know that there also been books separated from the canon that might go into detail and how much of an adversary he was to King Solomon. Okay, it says Hadad the Edomite is a character mentioned in the first book of Kings who was an adversary of King Solomon after Solomon turned to idols. Some scholars believe the text should read Hadad the Aramean. Okay, according to the account in 1 Kings, Hadad was a survivor of the royal house of Edom after the slaughter at the hands of Joab. He escaped as a child to Egypt, where he was raised by a pharaoh and married the queen's sister. After the death of King David, Hadad returned to try to reclaim the throne of Edom. Hadad's campaign to recapture Edom apparently met with success, as 1 Kings 11:25 states that another of Solomon's adversaries, Rezon, the son of Eliada, did harm to Solomon as Hadad did. Hadad did evil to King Solomon after gathering together a marauding band. Hadad he hated Israel. He hated Israel and reigned over Aram or Syria, Aram being Syria. Further, an Edomite princess is listed among the wives of King Solomon. Along with Rezon the Syrian, Hadad is one of two characters described as a Satan to Solomon. a word which was left untranslated and transliterated into Greek letters in the Septuagint. And who knows, maybe there are some other books, maybe I'll look more into that. But it's interesting that Hadad also, although we have a Wikipedia for Hadad the Edomite, there's also Hadad, this like sun, Horion, or this sun god, or this, yeah, also being linked with Enki, and that's what's interesting. So and what I talked about also with who I believe the Hyksos were, I definitely believe that's the people of Somalia. I definitely believe that many of them are descendants. Like if we're just talking Somalia, many may just be the descendants of ancient Egyptians, but all of the people of what later was called Egypt, which is really a Grecian term, they weren't all just Hamitic. They were initially Hamitic people, initially Hamitic, more specifically the children of Mitzrayim and then Cush. But I believe, and perhaps even before the 20th dynasty, that there was some Shemitic infusion, like for one, I believe the Hyksos, and I've shown this in my last stream. And like even when you look at like this guy here, the actor on the left, the Somali actor, can't think of his name. Even when you look at him, now I know I'm going to show you guys a mummy, so get ready. I know that mummies, when the corpse is mummified, I know that it's going to shrink up a lot of the soft tissue. So it's kind of hard to tell, you're not going to see all the facial fat or how thick the lips actually were, because a lot of the soft tissue is shrunken. However, we do know, like with King Tut, what was that? What dynasty was that? That 18th? We do know that with King Tut, Tutankhamun, the boy king, we do know that he had an overbite. When you think about it, he had an overbite. Yeah, he was said to have had an overbite. And they say that they noticed that with a lot of, and remember in my Ancient Egypt series, when I went through the dental records, and a lot of them seem to have overbites, with the teeth. And that's kind of common with a lot of Somali people. Not all, but yeah. So you see this mummy here, So basically the point that I'm making, yeah, they could have very much been descendants of Edom, who mixed in and mingled in, and eventually, because Esau, this is how they've obtained power. They were people that they were initially like under. They will now the scriptures say that Hadad, he was raised up by the Most High to be an adversary to Israel, considering that Solomon had failed to sin. And of course, we know that it is sin that brings curses. It's obedience that brings blessings. That's why we're in our situation now. Because since we want to be like the other nations, and we want to intermarry into them, and we want to worship the gods that they worship and be like them, well, okay, well, we're going to deal with them. But yeah, what I'm saying is I definitely believe that there were Edomites, and eventually, especially over time, as the centuries went on, and you had the Turkic invasion, and we all know that Esau also blended in with the indigenous descendants of Japheth in Europe, and what we now know as Europe. Why do you think E1B1B? Why do you think when you trace E1B1B, notice the places, yeah, that E1B1B is traced. They've also mixed in with the descendants of Japheth, like Javan, who are the original fathers of the people of Italy and Greece, mixed in with them, like, you know, the Macedonians, and yeah, Esau mixed in with them, mixed in with the perhaps the indigenous people, perhaps representing the Etruscans of Rome. Oh, well, it wasn't Rome, but when the infusion, they became one. He became one with the people of what became Rome, and they established the Roman Empire. Symbolic. And whenever they get power in a certain, you are going to know it, because for one, they're going to use the symbology. They are going to use the symbology of the phoenix masked as the eagle. But really, the phoenix is the bird of, and this is when you know where they got their traces. But I would think that actually, yeah. See, this is the deity coast of Edom. So, Adolf was E1B1B. Interesting. Interesting. Edomite kingdoms. Obadiah 1:4, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith Yahuwah. It says here, saith the Lord. Nest, eagle nest among the stars. The eagle is really the phoenix. It's as the Mason, renowned Mason, what's his name? Gosh. What's that Mason? Very famous. I can't think of it. Manly P. Hall said the eagle is basically a mask for the phoenix. Phoenix. Phoenicia. Phoenix coming from a word meaning red. Greek word meaning red. Phoenix rising from its ashes. You tear down their kingdom, but they're going to build it up. But it's going to be torn down again. It's happening. It's going to happen again. But it's going to be for good. Esau is the end. And Jacob is, yeah, Esau is the end. Yeah, so of course they've moved on from, East Africa. Yeah, I mean, they've moved on. Most people, like Somali people. So it looked like what we're seeing is Edom, the Edomite descendants. Yeah, see, now they have fused, they have mixed in with the descendants. They've already mixed in with the descendants of Ham, and then, then they just move on to whatever other people in power. So it's more like a mindset now. Most of the people of Somalia probably ain't got no idea, but they've now made the ultimate combination, mixing in with now they already mixed in with the Canaanites and the Phoenicians, but now they're blended in with the descendants of the Rephaim, the descendants, yeah. So what I see that it looked like what's happening is that some of the Edomite descendants of the West are now turning against the Edomite descendants who are in the East, and yeah. So it's like what's going on. It's just like with this red versus blue. It's like there's this implosion now. Then they're all turning on each other. Look at Russia versus Ukraine, pretty much representing some of the same ancestry. You got people in Somalia beefing with the Ethiopians. So it's like it's all collapsing. But I just want to E1B1B, I believe is Shemitic. And I definitely believe that there was a point where eventually the descendants of Edom pretty much fused in with a lot of the people, indigenous Hamitic people and Shemitic people, like infusing in with descendants of Ishmael, etc. Eventually, the Turks, eventually, and what were the Turks? Who were the original Turks? But eventually becoming the Arab nations, and like I said, the Catholic Church, as well as Islam, came from the same people. In fact, it is. You can look it up for yourself. That there's a lot of information that points to Islam being concocted by the Catholic Church to have control of certain area. Yeah. But anyways, get back with you guys later. Peace and love, family.